Good evening. I'm Stesha Brandon, the Literature and Humanities Program Manager at the Seattle Public Library. As we begin tonight, I would like to acknowledge that we are on Indigenous land. These are the traditional unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Duwamish people. We honor their elders past and present and thank them for their stewardship of this land. Welcome to our event with Mortada Czar, William Hutchins, and Christopher Merrill, presented in partnership with Seattle City of Literature, Iowa City UNESCO City of Literature, and the International Writing Program at the University of Iowa, and our friends over at Elliott Bay Book Company. We're grateful to our author series sponsors, the Gary and Connie Kunis Foundation, and the Seattle Times for generous support of library programs. Thank you as well to the Seattle Public Library Foundation. Private gifts to the foundation from thousands of donors help the library provide free programs and services that touch the lives of everyone in our community. I have a couple quick announcements before we get started. You can order copies of Mortada's book, I'm in Seattle, Where Are You?, from our friends over at Elliott Bay Book Company. And he actually went ahead and signed copies. So if you want signed copies of his book, you can get them from Elliott Bay Book Company. The store is open for limited browsing, curbside pickup, and delivery. You can order the book at their website, elliottbaybook.com, and we'll also drop a link to the book on their website in the chat as well, so you can just copy and paste. I also wanted to let you know, I should make it enabled, but we have live transcription available closed captioning available tonight. It's auto captioning. And to access the closed captioning, just click on the icon at the bottom of your screen. And then after tonight's conversation, we'll have time for questions from you. You can ask your question at any time by writing it in the Q&A box that's at the bottom of your screen. Now I am delighted to introduce tonight's program. Iraqi novelist, filmmaker, journalist, and visual artist Mortada Czar was born in Kuwait, grew up in Basra, and now lives in Seattle. He has a degree in petroleum engineering from the University of Baghdad and was also a member of the renowned International Writing Program, or IWP, at the University of Iowa. Czar is the author of a number of books, including 4 novels, a children's book, and a short story collection. And he's also illustrated 2 books for children. English translations of his work have appeared in Words Without Borders, World Literature Today, and Iraq 100, the first anthology of science fiction to have emerged from Iraq. Mortada's film Language was awarded a grant by the Doha Film Institute, and he also was the founder of the Seattle Arab Film Festival, which is run in partnership with the Northwest Film Forum. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce our friend Christopher Merrill. Christopher Merrill has published 6 collections of poetry, including Watchfire, which received the Lavin Younger Poets Award from the Academy of American Poets. He has published many edited volumes and translations, as well as 6 books of nonfiction, including his most recent Self-Portrait with Dogwood. His honors include an award in the Order of Arts and Letters from the French government, numerous translation awards, and fellowships from the John Simon Guggenheim Memorial and Ingram Merrill Foundations. He's been the director of the International Writing Program at the University of Iowa since 2000, was appointed to the National Council on the Humanities in 2012 by President Barack Obama, and has also served on the U.S. National Commission for UNESCO from 2011 to 2018. And we're having a little bit of a technical issue, but we're hoping that our translator, William Maynard Hutchins, who is the translator for this book, will be able to join us. William has translated many works of Arabic literature into English, and his translation of Nuwa by Alconi won the Alta National Prose Translation Award for 2015. A 3-time National Endowment for the Arts Fellow, Hutchins' translations from Arabic have appeared in the Brooklyn Rail, Banipal, Magazine of Modern Arab Literature, and Words Without Borders. He holds degrees from Yale University and the University of Chicago and has taught subjects ranging from English and Arabic to philosophy and religious studies at the Girard Institute in Sidon, Lebanon, the University of Ghana, the American University in Cairo, and Appalachian State University in Boone, North Carolina. So we'll hope that William will be able to join us in a little bit. So until that happens, we'll have Mortada and Christopher talking tonight about Mortada's deeply affecting memoir, I'm in Seattle, Where Are You?, which describes the indignities faced by openly gay artists in Iraq, as well as Mortada's impossible love story and journey to the US. Marginalized by his own society, he finds that there's also racism in his new home. Mortada will read a little bit and then we'll talk with Christopher before we open the floor to questions from you. And as I mentioned, you can ask your questions at any time during the program using the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So please give a warm welcome to Mortada Akhtar and Christopher Merrill, and hopefully very soon, William Hutchins. Hi.
Thank you so much, Stesha. I think that William may be signing it. It looks like we're going to have liftoff here in a moment.
Any minute now.
It is truly a pleasure to be working with the UNESCO City of Literature in Seattle, as well as the UNESCO City of Literature in Iowa City, and as a kind of silent partner for the proceedings tonight, the Baghdad UNESCO City of Literature. I see William is with us now, finally, so all systems are go. This event is for me of particular personal importance, partly because I live in Iowa City, UNESCO City of Literature, partly because my wife came from Seattle, where I went to graduate school, and partly because I had the good luck to spend a fair amount of time in Iraq, including in Basra, where Mortada grew up. And so in a certain sense, this book, I'm in Seattle, Where Are You, brings it all full circle. American literature, from Alexis de Tocqueville's Democracy down to the novels of Isaac Bashevis Singer, Vladimir Nabokov, and Isabel Allende, has always gained from the perspectives offered by newcomers to this country. And this is surely the case with Mortada Gazar, whose memoir, I'm in Seattle, Where Are You, is a dazzling account of love, loss, and the complications of exile. This Iraqi novelist, filmmaker, and artist, a Whitman-like figure who contains multitudes in his embrace of the cosmos, understands that, quote, stories like meteors obey the laws of physics. And what emerges in the stories he tells to an array of characters, including the statue of a vagrant, and Seattleites will recognize what I'm talking about under the Fremont Bridge, including the statue of a vagrant, is proof that while, quote, their energy does not fade or increase, they will shape the lives in thinking of those who have the good luck to hear them. And this is exactly what the book makes this book so readable and so critical at this point in history. Mortada was in the 2016 cohort of writers in the International Writing Program. His book begins, believe it or not, in Seattle on the night of Donald Trump's election. And what unfurls after that is, by turns, marvelous, horrifying, and deeply unforgettable. What I recall about Mortada in his time in Iowa City was how prolific an artist and writer he is. It seemed to me that his pen was always moving, whether it was on the page or in his sketchbook. He is one of those artists, rare in any time, who seems to see everything around him, take it in and turn it into work of enduring mastery. Now we're going to have, Mortada is going to read a little bit so we get a taste of the original Arabic in which it was written. And then it is really just such a thrill and an honor to have his translator, William Hutchins, here, whose translations of people like Naguib Mahfouz have been absolutely integral to my way of thinking about the Middle East. So I'm going to turn it over to either Mortada or William, and we'll hear a little bit first in Arabic and then some in English. And William, I think, will set up what he's going to read.
Hi, I thank you, Stesha, for having me here. I'm really happy to enjoy this wonderful event, and thank you, Chris, for. I really appreciate your talk. And so I think, should I start reading in Arabic now? Okay. So I'm gonna read the 2 or 3 short paragraphs from the chapter 11 in Arabic. في المكتبة العمومية تعثرت بساق رجل يقرأ بعد أن نهضت من الكرسي وقصدت شرب كوب من الماء. ابتسم الرجل قبل أن ينظر إلي وتبادلنا عبارات ودودة. بعد دقائق عدت إلى موضعي حاملا الماء ومختطا سيقان القراء المعقودة في طريقي ودون ما قصد وبوجه قانط كوجه شاب في شبابه. حدث أن اصطدمت قدمي بساق الرجل نفسه لينسكب قسط من الماء ويبلل ثيابه وكتابه وحذاءه. أعاد الابتسامة الثانية كما لو كان يخبئها على أهبة الاستعداد وللطوارئ في مكان ما بين فكيه. كانت أطول وأعرض هذه المرة. بسط ساقيه ورد على اعتذاري بأدب جم ثم نهض وغادر مكانه. كنت محرجا متورد الخدين وسارعت إلى دس رأسي في كتاب مغربي عن فنون التداوي بالفلسفة الرواقية. لم يغب الرجل طويلا، لقد عاد حاملا كوب ماء وحزمة مناديل. مسح طاولتي وقدم لي بضعة مناديل وباشر بمسح غلاف الكتاب والاعتناء بملابسه. سألني عن اسمي وسكني وأطبق على كتابه ووضعه بجانبه. حكيت له عني باختصار مجيبا شغف عينيه وتكراره لعبارات التعجب وأنا أحكي له باقتضاب سريع. لم ينس أن يقدم نفسه وظل يحدثني عن وضعه وقدومه مؤخرا إلى سياتل وقراره في السكن فيها مع صاحبيه حتى قاطعنا شاب آخر يشبهه واتخذ له كرسيا بجوارنا. هذا مرتضى يا ستيف، لقد جلبه المسيح إلينا، قال ملتفتا إلى صاحبه. لقد اعتبر الرجل إن حادثة اصطدامي به إشارة من الرب أو علامة مباركة ورسالة من رسائل المسيح السعيدة حسب قوله. انتبهت من ملابسه بأنه قس ومن ابتسامته التي تفيض بالمؤاخاة عرفت بأنه يريد أن يشرع في الحديث والاقتراب أكثر. كاد القس أن يمد يده ويضغط على كتفي متأوها من الرأفة والموازرة. زحفت يده على الطاولة وتوقف عند الحافة. أما أصابع صديقه السوداء الحانية فقد اشتبكت ببعضها واقتربت من الشفاه السفلى حتى التحمت بها. كل هذا والرجل يركز بعينيه في ملامحي وفم الذي يطلق الكلام خافتا ويجيب على الأسئلة بجمل مبتورة. Thank you. So this is a chapter 11 when I was like narrating how I get through for the first time of my life to the Seattle Public Library, the foundation or the organization that hosting this event tonight.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to read the English translation of what Mortada was doing.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. All right. So am I on? Can you hear me,
Yes.
Mortada?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yep.
Okay. So I headed to the Seattle Public Library and said, in a reading room there, after I stood up to get a cup of water, I tripped over the leg of a man who was reading. The man smiled and looked up at me. We exchanged warm greetings. Minutes later, I returned to my place carrying the water and avoiding the reader's legs that were crossed in my way. Unintentionally, with a face as despairing as Chaplin's in his youth, I collided with the same man's leg and some water spilled on his clothes, books, and shoes. He flashed another smile, which he seemed to have stored somewhere between his jaws for just such an emergency. This smile was broader and higher. He extended his legs and accepted my apology very politely. Then he rose and left his place, embarrassed and blushing. I quickly stuck my head in a Moroccan book about the healing arts and Stoic philosophy. The man returned shortly with a cup of water and a handful of paper towels. He wiped off my table and offered me some towels. He proceeded to dry off the book's cover and pat down his clothing. He asked me my name and where I lived. After he closed his book and set it aside, I told him about myself briefly, encouraged by his interested look and the repeated expressions of amazement he offered in response to my quick, abbreviated account. He didn't forget to introduce himself and then proceeded to tell me about his circumstances. He had recently arrived in Seattle and chosen to live here with his two friends. He continued in this vein until another young man who resembled him interrupted us and took a chair beside us. Steve, this is Mortada. Christ has brought him to us, he added, turning to his friend. This man considered the times I had stumbled into him a sign from the Lord, or a blessed nudge in one of the Messiah's glad tidings, or that's what he said. Glancing at his clothing, I realized he was a priest, and from his smile, which glowed with a fraternal spirit, I gleaned that he wished to continue our conversation and become friends. The priest seemed about to extend his hand and squeeze my shoulder, compassion and succor. His hand advanced across the table and stopped at the edge. His friend's compassionate black fingers were intertwined and drawn up toward his lower lip, touching it, while the man focused his eyes on my features and my mouth, which was speaking softly, answering their questions with truncated sentences. Okay, I think I'm gonna stop with that. So the book has Mortada obviously coming to Seattle to look for his true love, who is from Seattle, and this isn't working out too well so far. He hasn't found his friend, but he's just made 3 new friends, or 2, and there's a 3rd to come. So that's a bit of the translation.
Yeah, thank you for setting that up, William. I think you were also going to consider reading another section a little bit later so that we can get a sense of how the work unfolds across the pages. I think
Okay.
you might be, yeah.
Okay, I'll do that. Okay, so in Baghdad, Mortada meets Maurice, who's an American soldier, and they fall in love, and it's that simple. Okay, so this is a very awkward friendship. Okay, so at this point in the story, Mortada has a shack behind a print shop where he's working. Maurice, his American soldier boyfriend, comes to visit, but he doesn't just come to visit, he comes to visit in 3 Humvees, 3 armored vehicles. Okay, so I'm starting to read now. The sight of 3 American armored vehicles in front of the shack, the stork's, which he calls the stork's nest, excited the curiosity of niqab-wearing women who would open the doors of their houses and release a shameless laugh. They're former prostitutes, but they're now very religious. Because their faces were veiled, I never succeeded in tracing the laughter to the actual woman who was laughing, especially since she would cut short her laughter the moment she remembered she was no longer a whore at whose door men formed a queue, nor was she standing half naked at her window, chewing gum while rubbing her groin. Okay, so Maurice comes with his fellow soldiers, while Maurice's companions treated my house like an archaeological site for foreign tourists. Enraptured by the magic of the East, they messed around with them, pots, kettles, spoons, books, pens, ran their fingers over them with phony admiration. Maurice, meanwhile, would sit on the floor beside my bed, asking me any questions he wanted. It's a taxing situation when someone besieges you with his glances and scans you with the rays of his eyes, from the arch of your foot to the crown of your head, and you can't escape the scrutiny of his senses for even a few seconds. When he stops his investigation and allows you to be at ease, you exhale profoundly as if you have just escaped from a critical situation. So later on in this chapter and later on in terms of time, uh, Mortada gets a TV, and that there's a fight, a sort of minor fight between the soldiers over control of the remote. So a very American issue. Okay, so I think that's what I'll do.
Great. Thank you so much, William. So if we could set up the whole book as a frame, Mortada arrives in Seattle on what he later learns is election night at a house occupied by three, shall we say, very memorable characters. And I wonder if Mortada, you could give us a little bit of a picture of who these men are, Eric and Josie and Luang, and how this all came to pass.
Oh, thank you. So, thank you, William, for a nice reading. So yeah, they are kind of connection I made during they are like I made them separately. They are like, I have no idea they already kind of like part of Maurice community. So I thought I made some connection, and some people guide me to them or asked them to help me. So it was kind of so I came to Seattle. I didn't know, you always like this when you come to a new city, you don't know how much this city is big or how small or how the community is. So then it took me a long time to understand. It's not the world is so small, is also each city is very small itself. So then I figured out they were very connected to Maurice, but they didn't tell me. Anyway, so those three people, I think it's very common in the like gay communities here, where people live in a very good sort of diversity. So they don't. So they always break the isolation or the separations community. So they are always able to live in a good sort of diversity. For some reason, they were three very unique personalities. They are very different. Each one is a story himself. Each one is a book himself, and they were. So it was easy to tell when you meet them. They had a lot in their life, and they're suffered a lot, and they had really a great history. So it was really joyful time. It was really very interesting, very smart people, and yeah. So they add their craziness added to me a lot, to my craziness too.
One of the things I love about this book is the ease with which you move from your present circumstances in Seattle, taking a room in the house with these three men, back to your life in Iraq. And you do that with sometimes just the slightest of moves. So, for example, Josie, who's in a wheelchair, at some point, you notice that he's wearing a wig. And when you were walking him somewhere up and down a street in his motorized wheelchair, he asks you if you have ever worn a wig. And that triggers a memory of, which is, as I noted in the introduction, rather horrific, about which will give the reader a sense of what life was like for a young gay teenager in Basra, a fairly conservative city, even by Iraqi standards. Maybe you can tell us, give us that picture of what came to pass there.
Yeah, thank you. So I picked some scenes with Josie and Liao, specifically those scenes that I can use to jump to my past. And this is also was very real because sometimes, mostly all the time, I find things that made me remind and made me remember a lot of memories. So since it's a book, I only choose the scenes that make me make me find a reason to tell something. So yes, the story about the Whigs was best. It was very. It was something written in the book. Maybe the reader can read it or reach out to this specific chapter when I was like telling what happened to me as a young gay person, and how the tribal law forced me to wear a wig.
And part of what there is so much humor in this book to balance the sense of tragedy. At one point, the three men are saying number 7, number 8, and Mortada's trying to figure out what is this number, and it's because it turns out they're counting the number of sentences that Mortada will speak, because at least in the conceit of the book, when you arrive in Seattle, you're almost speechless, less confident in your English than you are now, and in a strange city with people you don't know. But once you begin to tell the stories about your past and how you have come to be in this place, the sentences come rolling off your tongue in one after the other. And so I wonder if in the act of writing this, was it hard to move from the present circumstances, a scene in Seattle, into the past, or which came easier to write for you, the present or the past?
Actually, the present was always irritate the past in me, so it was almost the same. But the issue was like how I can choose the right context or the right sentence to make people understand what I was. I was not readers. I mean people. Those three people I was live with, and also it took me long time to understand. Even now I am not sure. Sometimes I check with myself. I'm not sure if they really got what I was saying, because still I'm comparing my ability of like English now and then. So I think I'm still not sure if they really got what I was saying. But since I wrote this book, so I wrote it in Arabic. So now it's writing is much better. Not easier, but it's I think that it's something I love to do. So it wasn't difficult. But talking difficult, like telling people in person, it's not something easy, because you not always expect them to have a background, especially people here in the United States or in Seattle. They have no idea. They have no knowledge about what's going on out of this country. That's why they need like long introduction. Even educated people, some people who are really into Arabic or Arabic culture or the Iraqi history or culture, they still need introduction. So the issue is with those thick barricades you face always. It is not about language sometimes.
And what makes that possible, of course, is William's brilliant translation. And so let me turn to you, William, and ask, were there particular issues that you faced in translating Mortada, who really is a much different kind of writer from, let's say, Mahfouz? What were some of the challenges that you faced in trying to bring his work into English?
Well, it's not so much a challenge. What was really nice was having being able to send a quick email to Mortada and say, I don't understand this, or what was this, or but what we did more typically was just finish a chapter and send it to him, and then let him see what gotten right or not. But Mortada writes a very beautiful Arabic. It's not a kind of, I mean, it's the same elegant Arabic of Mahfouz. and with a lot of sophistication of emotional analysis, which is also Mahfouz's characteristic.
Could you maybe give us a sense of when Mortada's mother plays a central role, I think, in negotiating a way out of the troubles that he finds himself in. And there's a certain amount of folklore and let's say religious custom and belief that is back of all of this. When she comes from, I think, as I understand it, she's a part of the Marsh Arab people who live closer to Basra, but are coming from a different tribe than, for example, his father. How do you bring all that kind of information across in to an audience that is largely unfamiliar with, as Mortada says, the intricacies of daily Iraqi life?
Well, for me, I think explaining his mother's folkloric view of Islam is maybe easier than when the character Mortada is a student in Baghdad. He gets really deep into Shia theology and spirituality, and it's partly because he's trying very hard not to express any sort of gay personality, that he's really head over heels in Shia spirituality, as I said. And so that, I think Americans, to the extent they know something about Islam, are more comfortable with Sunni Islam than Shi'i Islam. That took some, so there were several editors, like the style editor was getting a little fussy about not quite understanding Shia, and that was more of a challenge, not a conceptual challenge to translate, but just to make sure it got across to the American reader. But his mother, his mother's responsible for sending him to look for scrap metal in the former battlefield. She's kind of punishing him. She's got some personality there.
Yeah.
Some backbone or whatever.
Backbone as well, for sure. Yeah. Well, considering that Americans largely had no understanding at all of the differences between, let's say, Sunni Islam and Shia before the invasion of Iraq and occupation, it's as if a whole new vocabulary was brought into contemporary English discourse, thanks to the intrusion of American troops. And what makes the book so interesting is that Mortada falls in love with one of the GIs, and the scene that you read for us, William, is in a way typical of what seems almost otherworldly, the kinds of events that happen to Mortada and that are then recounted in this book. Maybe, Mortada, you could tell us a little bit about some of what your literary influences might be when you sat down to write this book. What were some of the writers in your imagination that you were looking to as ways to think about putting all this material together?
So, of course, I put in myself. I'm writing a nonfiction thing. I'm writing a memoir. So it should be it should be had some deep feeling inside from my inside, or So this is my life. I really got affected by religion. I really had like long experience with the spiritual teachings, with Shia teachings, with so if I write things about Maurice or about my life or about my teenagerhood, and if I ignore this is gonna be a big or huge gap. So this is kind of a structure that's formed me, so I cannot avoid it anymore. I really it's really hard to avoid this part, not just in me, maybe people and a lot of people in my generation. So we got affected by the American invasion, and also we got affected by those 10 years uh, by the American siege when the Iraqi economy went really in a horrible way, very bad. So all the people went very poor. So this economy attack actually destroyed the middle class in Iraq. So all people, even the rich people, became very poor. So those 10 years formed us, religious leaders, and of course Saddam dictatorship. So I meant to write something about me or people who present my generation and point out those 3 or 4 factors that's if someone are like interested in reading about our history or reading about characters or immigration people they lived here in the US. If you wanna or they wanna or if she or he wanna make a solid background about people like me, this is really a good source. Like those 3 or 4 factors. So me as someone who belongs to the Iraqi modern literature scene, the Iraqi literature now, and this is a good point actually, when some American readers feel some difficulties with such translated books, it's just because the American literature now are really affected by something else. So my modern Iraqi literature, we used to be like we used to read like American literature, but in general, our like influence it came from our like heritage, like Arab literature heritage, Islamic literature, and also American Latin, Europe, French, Russian, things like this. So that's why maybe there's sense of differences or difficulties when this book face like American readers. So I think it's all about tests. It's all about those 2 words when they meet. It's different.
Well, lest the reader get the idea that this book is difficult to understand, I must say that it is a compulsively readable book because you are such a great storyteller, and a lot of information is conveyed without the reader quite knowing it through the mastery of the storytelling.
Thank you.
So. Can you talk a little bit about the difference between writing a memoir and writing novels? And I should also note if you could give us a sense of how the drawings that are included in the book, how they helped you to make sense of your material.
Yeah, so the first part of your question, how I feel the difference between, it's my first time writing a whole book as a memoir. It's very challenging because I'm reaching a very, very critical and very personal life, very personal memoir. It's kind of, as some people saying, it's kind of coming out book because my life before and after this book is totally not the same. It's not my like how I present myself. It's different now. So writing a memoir is first of all, it's not something common in my Arab literature scene. Not all writers or novelists or storytellers writing their memoir. Mostly memoirs for like someone who has like 50 or 60 years experience with writing, for example, and he's writing things to teach young people how to write. So memoir is not from what I came from. Memoir is not for a young writer, and also memoir is for usually for like recent presidents or military leaders, for like those history people, they meant or managed to write their memoir to tell us something unofficial or something they couldn't have the chance to tell people. So this is what memoir means in my Arabic context. So it's why it was really challenging things to write about real things. But I felt like I'm very I'm a fiction writer, so I couldn't make it very I couldn't resist the style of a fiction writing, because my fiction writing is is more like experiment, or more to find creative way to tell a story, or to narrate a story. And I couldn't resist that feeling. So when I wrote this memoir, I also found ways to write the truth, or write what really happened in a creative way. I tried. I don't know what's the result. That's already left for readers and critics. But I mean, it wasn't something easy. It was very interesting, and it's I think really mean a lot for me. About drawings or the illustration inside the book, I think this is also part of my personality. I used to like make a lot of like illustration, or like simple doodles map when I talk or when I listen. So it's kind of my attitude. So I think I found it very close to me when I find my text or my paragraphs, and there is illustration beside it. It's really represent me. That's what I do all the time.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that came to mind as I was reading your book and looking at the marvelous drawings, is there's a British novelist and artist who was in the International Writing Program some years before you, named Edward Carey.
Oh yeah,
and
I know.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
during the pandemic, Edward has done a drawing every day.
Wow, yeah.
As he says, a drawing a day, and he puts them up on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and it's a way to keep his pen moving. But I think also a way to pay attention in these complicated times. I wanted to ask you, what has been the reception of the book in Arabic societies?
Like temporarily closed all the windows, so I don't share any news about it in Arabic. This is temporary, just because I don't feel I'm ready to it. But I'm not. I don't prevent anything. I don't object anything. If someone needs to or wants to post anything about it in Arabic, I don't mind this. But from my side, I don't feel I want to do that. I just share things about it in English. If someone able to read in English, that's fine. I'm okay with it. But I don't know. Maybe in the future or the near future, if I got a good opportunity of publishing it in Arabic, I will. But so far, I don't think about it, and there is no reception yet in Arabic for this book.
Okay, it seems as if that it would be risky. We have a question from an anonymous attendee that says, could you talk about your publishing journey? How did you find a publisher for this book?
Oh, there's a story. There's a story actually. So I have a journey with my publishing time in Arabic, and it's a really difficult journey. But this one is not difficult, then it's fun maybe. So I wrote a short story in a magazine here in the US, and this is the short story titled the Tuesday Bar or something. The story was part of, it wasn't a real story, but the sense of it was real. So the story is about someone who's just like me. So when I moved to Seattle, I started to write like when I write a short story or a fiction book or something, I found myself, I couldn't go away from my real life. And that's really unlike my life before Seattle. When I write fiction or short stories, I don't make characters look like me. But what happened here, all my characters just look like me. So the character in this short story that I published in this magazine, it was an immigrant guy who went to a gay bar in Seattle, and for some reason he found a lot of soldiers in the bar. They figured out he's an Iraqi guy, and there were 3 or 4 soldiers in this bar. They were served in Iraq, so they started to treat him in a different way. Anyway, so there was a story about this thing, and then the publisher Gabby Fort Bates, she reached out to me and we talked, and I told her about my story, my real story, and she suggested writing it a book, and I wrote the book. Yeah.
So we have another question in a similar vein. How did you find your translator? And what was your relationship like since he was translating such personal stories? So maybe that's a question for both Mortada and William.
I think it's more for William. I think so.
Oh,
Right.
has he frozen?
Okay.
I think he's frozen. So it's all.
Okay, so people who translate from Arabic to English are not. There is like maybe, as I feel, it's like few people who are really able to translate creative writing from Arabic to English. So I made my list, and we started to, and the publisher made her list, and we started to reach out to people and check their quality. Since I also am able to read in English, I'm not perfect, but I'm able to read in English. I can feel my original text and how it's related to this translated text. And when we reached out to William Hedges, since William has really a great certificate, a great CV. He's the one who translated Najib Mahfouz and Ibrahim al-Kuni and Ala al-Aswani, I guess, and a lot of short stories from. So and William has a really good point, which is like he's into my area geographically. He translated Muhammad Khalid. He's one of the pioneers of the modern Iraqi literature. So I felt there's a big connection. This guy is very, like, he's rare, like not a lot of people able to understand the area I came from. He's really into this, and he translated for people. I'm really into them in their writing. They are kind of my teachers. So when William said yes, I was very happy.
I can see why. And we have a message from Susan Harris at Words Without Borders. If you look in the chat, you can link to the story that Mortada is talking about here. One of the great resources.
Susan helped with connected me with the publisher. Sorry, I missed that part. I'm sorry. Yeah, she helped me with she published the story, and then she told the publisher about it. Thank you.
No, that is a fortuitous connection, and I wish that William could hear what we were saying, but I fear that he's frozen right now, as happened at the start of the event. We're coming up on the close of our time. I think we have time for one more question. I don't see anything in the chat, so I'm going to ask Mortada, what are you working on now? What's the next book we can imagine coming from you?
I don't know if I'm allowed to say that or no, but my new proposal of my upcoming fiction book is got approved. So probably next year, my new fiction book gonna appear in English, translated to.
And can you tell us where the fiction is set? we can know that much. Is it in Seattle or is it in Iraq or someplace in between?
Someplace in between.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here
Well,
and there, yeah.
Mortada, it's so good to be able to see you in this crazy Zoom context and to know that you are well and thriving and have written really
Thank
just
you.
a book for the ages. I think we're going to turn it back over to Stesha, but I want to just say by way of goodbye, shukran, Mortada.
Thank you. Afwan.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Chris and Mortada, and of course, William, who was having some technical difficulties. We're grateful for his reading of the translation. And I want to remind folks that you can order copies of I'm in Seattle, Where Are You? From our friends over at Elliott Bay Book Company. They have signed copies of the book, which you can order on their website, or you can go into their store, which is a beautiful store. They are open for limited browsing, curbside pickup, or delivery. And you can order the book through their website, elliottbaybook.com, or we'll pop a link in the chat to the specific page on their website for Mortada's book. And of course, you can also find I'm in Seattle, Where Are You? At the library. We make a little cameo there in the story, but you can actually read it through the library, and our website is spl.org. We are so grateful to everybody who made tonight's program possible. Thank you to our program partners at Seattle City of Literature, at Iowa City UNESCO City of Literature, at the International Writing Program, and Elliott Bay Book Company. Thanks to our sponsors, the Gary and Connie Kunis Foundation, the Seattle Times, and the Seattle Public Library. And of course, thanks to all of you for joining us tonight. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Good night. Good night, Mortada. Good night, Chris. Good night, William, wherever you are.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Stesha. Bye.
Take care.
Bye. Take
Bye,
care.
everybody.